In this video, we're going to do the overview of the electromagnetic spectrum, talk about everything that there is, kind of all the important pieces there are to know about it. So first off, the electromagnetic spectrum is a name for all the forms of electromagnetic radiation. So the electromagnetic spectrum is basically just a list of all the types of electromagnetic radiation. And electromagnetic radiation is a wave that propagates through the electric and magnetic fields. And in a couple units, we'll talk about electricity and magnetism, and you'll get kind of a better understanding of this. But for now, you can just imagine it's non-physical stuff, and this is just a wave through that. So if you can kind of picture like a giant, for example, a giant sheet of graph paper that's not made of any physical stuff, and then that's waving. That's electromagnetic. That's sort of like an electric or a magnetic field, and then the waves through that are this radiation. Again, we'll worry about the specifics of what this is and how it like actually exists in a later unit, but for now we're just going to focus on that it's a wave, and if you're not quite sure what it's moving in, what the medium is, that's fine. Electromagnetic radiation is also, we sometimes call light, because it contains visible light. And so we kind of extend, well, all the rest of the stuff is sort of light, but the best way to think about it is everything's electromagnetic radiation, and it's just some of that we can see. So if you see the spectrum down here, you'll notice that it's divided by the frequency or by the wavelength. Both are fine to think about. Personally, and I think probably slightly more common, people think about frequencies, because as we'll see later, this is frequency is associated with energy. But they're functionally the same, because if you remember, V, the velocity equals the wavelength times the frequency. So it's just that as the frequency is bigger, the wavelength is smaller, and vice versa. And you'll notice a bunch of things on here that might look somewhat familiar. So we've got, radio waves, microwaves, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays. And yeah, this is basically contains also the visible light. So there's a small bit of electromagnetic radiation that our eyes are sensitive to. The rest we can't see. So what do we need to know about the different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum? Let's just pull all these up here so I've got them all ready to go. Okay, radio and TV. All of our wireless communication uses radio or TV waves. So Wi-Fi, radio, over the air, TV over the air, etc. And as far as we can tell, and from all the research, it seems to point to that there are minimal health risks to being exposed to this kind of radiation. As far as we haven't noticed anything in the, probably nearly 100 years of radio. We haven't noticed anything in the nearly 60 years of television that's been widespread. And then we haven't noticed anything in the probably 20-ish years of Wi-Fi and stuff like that. And of course, before they actually do any of these things, they do extensive tests beforehand, and then we just haven't found any edge cases on top of what we already checked for. Microwave radiation heats water very, very well. What it ends up doing is basically it flips the water molecules back and forth. So it causes the water molecules to vibrate back and forth. And so that water starts moving a lot. And if you remember, what is temperature? Temperature is just kind of the average motion of the molecules. So those water molecules jiggle a lot. They jiggle all the molecules around them, and that basically ends up heating up anything with water in it. The dangers of microwaves is that they can cook things that have a lot of water in them. So, if you get exposed to microwave radiation, it'll start to cook your cells because there's a lot of water in there, and that's going to cause damage to you. Infrared, this is the light emitted by body temperatures. There's a thing called black body radiation, which is just the idea that even things that don't emit or that depending on the temperature of an object, it always emits light because there's vibrations of cells vibrations of molecules, and it's some cool stuff that we'll probably talk about when we talk about what is light and how is light made in electricity and magnetism. But this is why we have night vision goggles, because we can basically look for what is light that is, this is heat vision, because you're looking for what's the light being given off by objects that are roughly human body temperature or roughly animal body temperature. And so that's where you can see that. This is also responsible for the warmth that you feel of sunlight. So sunlight feels warm because you are having that infrared radiation be absorbed by your skin or whatever it's touching, and that's causing it to heat up. Visible light is the light that our eyes are sensitive to. And in particular, our eyes are really sensitive to red, green, and blue light. Any other color of light that we can see, what's really happening is we're having some of our cells, our red cells and our green cells are picking up, say, yellow light, and then our brain interprets that as yellow light. If it's like a tealy color, then the green and blue are picking up, are activating, and our brain's interpreting it as that cyan or teal color. But there's a lot of cool stuff we can talk about here. I'm going to skim past it, but if you want to talk about light and how we see and what that means for technology, there's a lot of really cool things there. UV causes, this is a higher energy light, and it will cause sunburns. It can cause eye damage and skin cancer. So this is pretty bad, or can be pretty damaging, pretty dangerous. Low levels of UV light are generally fine, but extensive or lots of it can cause problems, and there's a fair bit of this thrown off by the sun. That's why it's good if you're going to be outside for a while, put on sunscreen, wear sunglasses, wear long sleeves to block that UV radiation. X-rays, the interesting thing about X-rays and why we care about them is they travel through skin and muscle. But not easily through bones. So they're actually absorbed by bone. So what this means is if you put a piece of film behind your, say, arm, and then you shoot X-rays through it, it'll go through all the places where you've got skin and muscle and hit the film and expose the film, but it won't go through where you've got bones, so it won't expose that, and that's how we use X-rays to take pictures of inside your body without actually opening you up. And that's also why X-rays are only really useful for taking pictures of bones. If you want to take pictures of other things, you have to use other methods. And then finally, gamma radiation. This is basically everything at the very high end or the high energy, and this has the most health risks. This energy basically gets into your cells, it goes straight through, and then if it hits your DNA, it messes it up, causes all kinds of cancer, destroys the cells. It's nasty stuff. You don't want to have to deal with it. So that's electromagnetic spectrum, just kind of an overview of all the different parts. What we'll talk about later is kind of how electromagnetic radiation, what's interesting about it from a wave perspective. And then in a couple units, like I said, we'll talk about how this is actually made and what it actually means to be a wave in the electromagnetic field.